Good day and hello, my name is Brian. Why is there 24 segments in a day? Or another way to phrase it is, why is the day broken up into 24 segments? Now, I use this word segments instead of hours because if you phrase it hours, people automatically start going into different other ways. And part of the question is to promote thought, because most people actually don't know the answer. And a lot of people try to figure out the answer, including me, who may not actually have the answer. But for me, it's like, what makes sense? Most of the answers I hear, and a lot of the answers I've searched for on the internet, don't make sense. Now, my answer does make sense. Now, well, maybe rephrase that. A lot of the answers make sense, but they're way out there, and they don't seem to have a very good solid thread leading it back to why it is. Now, I figured out a very simple answer that fits. There's obviously probably a couple loopholes in it. I don't know. That's part of the fun, seeing if I'm right, and also how much it makes sense to you. Now, why is there 24 segments in a day? Well, we can probably first agree that a day is, at least, one revolution of the Earth upon its axis. So a day is a day. Anywhere you go in the world, you can sort of agree upon that. Well, maybe a difference at the North and South Pole, but but the idea still holds. Now, of course, why 24? Why not 20? Why not 10? Why not 30? Why not 100? Why 12? Seems like a really odd number considering most of our base systems that we use nowadays. So, first thing most people would probably do is, of course, well, what else do we use that has a base similar to this, a similar type system? And truthfully, there's very, very, very few things that we do nowadays, or even prior, that actually have this type of numbers for the system. Now, the closest system I actually found, which actually had any strong relation to this, and actually makes sense, is actually the Babylonian system. They actually have a base 60. What's base 60? What is base? Well, most people nowadays use what's called base 10. You only have 10 digits to make up all your numbers. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. From those 10 numbers, you make all your other numbers. Babylonians, being heavy traders and everything else, actually used a base 60. Why? Because it's actually very easy to break up product into equal piles with a base 60 system, which is the closest thing I actually found to explain why we have the numbers we have for clocks, because it's very easy to break up. And that made sense, but didn't really fit, because there's too large of a distance between it, too many differences in things, and too many different cultures which have differing opinions on why things should be. But it does sort of suit for why it sort of works. But like I said, it doesn't fit for how it is now. Like, how did it even get to this point? Because there's such a large distance between them. So, thinking through other things, I started thinking about other stuff is, well, what's the first step you could do to start asking these questions? Well, why does everyone use the same system would be the next question. Because if you look at calendars, there's so many different calendars available. You have the Jewish calendar, you have the Chinese calendar, you have the Gregorian calendar. There's so many different ways to actually break up a year and also calculate different numbers of days. We can also agree on how many days there are in a year, 365 and a quarter. Now from there, you make calendars, figuring out how to keep track on a regular basis, certain number of days and stuff. That also goes into why is there a certain number of months in a year and everything else. We've actually had different counts of months over the times. And of course that also depends on which calendar you're using. Most lunar calendars have 13 months in them because they're based off the moon cycle. Most solar calendars, which are based off just solely the sun, well, that even then can vary. They've actually had 10 months, 12 months, 13 months also, and a couple of other different counts, which of course, depending on how many months you have, depends on how many days are in the month, you can break it up in different ways. But this is also a good example of time, dealing with a day, dealing with how much time, well, how you break up what's in a day. Look how much difficulty we had with breaking up how much times in a year. It's always the same time, but it's how you segment it. Well, why don't we have different places in the world which have different segmenting of time during a day? We all use a 24-hour cycle. Well, truthfully, most of us, at least depending on how far back you go, actually have a 12-hour clock. Think back to the old phase clock which goes around in a circle. That actually only had 12 hours on it. Well, why is that such a ubiquitous thing? Because that's actually what caused it to be such the way it is. Because all the sailing vessels that went around the world needed precise timekeeping devices to actually know their latitude. Or was it longitude? I forget which. But they needed that to keep track of where they were. Well, once they showed up in a place that didn't have the same type of mechanical clocks, and the other guys saw it, they're like, oh my God, dude, this thing works great. I can keep track of when things are a lot better than, you know, burning a certain number of candles and keeping track of how long it burns. You know, because that's actually one way they used to do it, is they'd light a candle and they knew how long the candle would burn for. Oh, it's been a quarter stick, it's been a half stick, it's been 3/4 of a stick. You know, how much is burned for it. Or some more high-tech areas might have some type of fancy water clock. Or they might just have a simple sundial, which again is how do you segment it. But, so, oh hey, it's in this weird 12 step. Hey, it still works, we can still keep track of a day. It doesn't really matter to them because you still keep track of the time that you have. How much time has passed? Oh, 1 segment, 2 segments, 3 segments. It doesn't really matter so much for them because you can still keep track of time. Yes! So, that's why the whole world runs on a 24-hour cycle to most people, is because of the mechanical clocks that were carried around on the sailing vessels. Now, that leads into the next part, is where did those clocks come from? Well, most of the sailing vessels, the ones that went around to all the world and scared people, invaded people, traded with people, made friends with people, was invaded by other people because they pissed them off for invading them. Yeah, the whole cycle of life. Well, that mostly started over in Europe. So it was apparently a European clockmaker that first made the ubiquitous mechanical clock that was used upon the sailing vessels. Well, where did he get the idea about splitting up the clock into 12 segments? Well, he probably based most of his timing of the day and everything else off the other timekeeping devices he had, which probably would have been a water clock or a sundial. Now, most of those in Europe came from the Greeks and the Romans. Now, they broke up their day before they actually had solid timekeeping devices, just like any other old culture. However the heck they wanted. But of course, most of the time they usually did it over some type of structure that they had in their lives that was just very big. Well, what's the best way to keep time? Well, how do the heavens keep time? Because that's the way they did a lot of timekeeping, is by looking at the stars. That's how you kept track of the years, that's how you kept track of the months. So why not keep track of the smaller pieces? If you can keep track of the time from the heavens, why not keep track of the time on Earth by using the same method? So a lot of the day was broken up into 12 segments because that's also how they kept track of the stars, by breaking it into 12 segments, the signs of the zodiac. And that's where the 12 hours during a daylight cycle came from a sundial broken into 12 parts of the signs of the zodiac. So you'd have the hour of Aquarius, the hour of Pisces, the hour of Aries, and through all the other signs of the zodiac. And since there's also a dark cycle, you'd also have the same light. And that's all in one day. A light cycle, a dark cycle, all broken into 12 parts of the zodiac. So now, of course, since I already could be pointing out of the Babylonian system with a phase 60, well, that's where it leads into the question, well, where did the 60 come from? Again, this goes back into the mechanical clocks and when they were made. Because prior to that, yeah, some people might want to measure smaller segments, but in general, most people's lives ran on an hour basis, if not a day or week basis. Because how long did it take to travel around? How long did it take to do stuff? Oh, I'll see you in about an hour or 2 hours' time. You didn't have to be as precise. Because most of the stuff we were measuring wasn't that precise either. We were measuring different pieces of the grander world. We weren't worried about all these little things. Well, what's interesting is about the time of the mechanical clocks, time of enlightenment and time of people thinking and everything else, an interesting mathematical system was actually being developed. Calculus. And that's actually also where the words used for time actually came for these. A minute is a minute derivative of an hour. A second is the second minute derivative of an hour. That's all those really are. If you try to find some other significance in it, have fun. But that's basically where they came from. Yeah, it's also cool that it matches up the Babylonian system because that also shows how it can also be broken up into easy segments. Interesting. Coincidence? Possibly, but like I said, it's trying to see the flow between it. What is the connecting thread? All our clocks are in 12 daylight segment hours. 12 and 12, 24, 24 hours in a day. All our mechanical clocks, the reason they were spread throughout the world is because they were on sailing vessels. They needed to keep track of navigation. All those ships mostly came from Europe. Europeans were keeping track of time through water clocks and also the solar. And of course that all came from the Greeks and Romans, which kept track of their time through the signs of the zodiac. So, 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 hours of daylight time, 12 hours of night time, 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes in an hour, which is the minute derivative of an hour, 60 seconds in a minute because it is the second minute derivative of an hour. And that's all it is. There's some food for thought, and I hope you have a beautiful day.